Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to our first podcast here at Forbes. The goal with this podcast is to bring awareness and education to our local business leaders to really kind of highlight what's going on in the cybersecurity world. What do they need to know? What do you need to know? And ultimately, it's going to lead to a safer Cincinnati. And here to help me with that is our COO, John Faust. John, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm John Faust, COO of Forbes. I've been working here since 2007, so 18 years now. Started out as the person who would install PCs on desks and do regular desktop support and all those sorts of things. Moved into more of a cybersecurity role, things like that. Back in the day, managing firewalls. I've installed over 500 firewalls, all those sorts of things. But realistically now there's a shift that's been going on in the industry over the past decade, and a lot of companies aren't understanding what it really takes to make them secure. And so I'm one of our chief cybersecurity trainers. I do a lot of things with that, and we just want to kind of educate people on what they're not seeing that's going on with the industry, and they think they're more secure than they are.
That's great, John. Yeah. So one of the big questions right now is kind of what is the newest, kind of latest vulnerability that's out there right now? Is there anything that everyone should be aware of today? Right now, is there a new vulnerability?
So the biggest thing that we've seen over the last 18 months is really business email compromise. It's replaced phishing in a lot of the ways of how people would get initial access into systems. And a lot of people have a false sense of security that, hey, I have a really good firewall that's out there, I have a good spam filter, all those sorts of things, and that they're safe because of that. But realistically, business email compromise is when somebody you work with, even not at your own company, gets their email taken over, and then they use that interaction to let you have a higher trust to opening their more spear phishing messages. So it has a lot more success than regular phishing. It causes a lot more emails to be compromised to perpetuate this business email compromise thing. And we also see it as a lot of the gateway point that leads to ransomware eventually at these companies is initial access happening through that.
So what you're saying is even though I know what to look for, I can train my team, they know what to look for on an email, really none of that stuff's going to matter because it's essentially who they're doing business with that's going through this.
Well, so here's the thing, is the user training's great. It really helps eliminate a lot of the bad things that people were clicking on in the past. So people are clicking on less things overall. But what's going on these days is we've had examples of somebody who's getting their kitchen remodeled, and her contractor gets his email taken over, and he replies back to an existing chain of emails and says, hey, I have an updated drawing for you. I know of no user in the world that would not click on that email.
I would have clicked on that.
Yeah, right. It's very high.
Yeah,
right. It's very highly trusted. It's not going to raise off any alarm bells. I'm expecting this to come in. Well, instead of being a drawing, it had a bad offensive hacking type software that it tried to download to the computer, and our cyber tools did a lot to stop that from having the bad thing happen, but that endpoint was compromised. We had to reformat her computer, and we made sure that nothing else was touched, but we see a lot of companies that we talk to where they do click on that thing, that endpoint gets compromised, their EDR software doesn't pick it up and maybe picks up a tiny portion of it, and so they think it's clean when it's not, and then that just perpetuates farther down the line to where the company ends up getting encrypted, having to pay a ransom, all those sorts of pieces.
So essentially, they clicked on the attachment. The attachment did nothing. What would you recommend somebody do in that circumstance?
Right. Yeah. So that's a very good thing. We've changed our user training that we give out to people and say, okay, now that attachment was clicked on, or that link was clicked on, and it didn't do what you expected, that doesn't mean that it didn't do exactly what the hacker wanted it to do. Right.
Gotcha.
And so that's now a red flag. Is like, I clicked on this attachment, it opened, or it didn't appear to open, it didn't appear to do anything. Back in the day, somebody would just send an email out to the person who sent it and said, hey, your attachment didn't work. And the hackers know this. And so they'll reply back with a good attachment to let your guard be down. But realistically, you need to train your company's employees to say, okay, I clicked on something. Now that didn't do what I expected. Reach out to IT support, reach out to them and find out what's going on, because it may very well have been a threat actor doing something on your machine that you just didn't notice because they hid it very well.
Gotcha. Now, of the compromises that are out there right now, what would you say the business email compromises percentage, if you were to put a percentage on it of, compromises in general, what would that percentage look like? How many come from a business email compromise, would you say?
I would say most of them come from business email compromise. In the beginning of 2024, we were seeing a business email compromise across the thousands of endpoints that we have and email addresses that we have once a quarter. Now we're realistically seeing it 18 months later about once a week. So it's being more prevalent. These are exponentially growing because they get access to somebody's email inbox, and then they send it out to all the people that they know, and it just keeps growing and expanding and expanding.
Oh, wow.
Including a couple of weeks ago, we got a message from a cyber insurance provider that was sharing a SharePoint document with us. Now, we hadn't been working with this provider for about 10 months, so we were very confused as to why this message was come up, but we were like, okay, this looks like this person's email account got taken over, and we reached out to them, and sure enough, this person's email had been taken over, and so it doesn't really matter who you are. Everybody should have their guard up about this because somebody who is like a cyber insurance provider, quote unquote, should know better. But It's very hard to vet these things out. It's pretty easy to have it happen to you, and if you're not looking for the right things in the back end, then it can perpetuate very quickly.
So if you would have made that phone call, would you have clicked?
If it had been recently, so if I had been dealing with them within the last week or so, and we had been talking about sharing documents back and forth, maybe.
Okay.
That's really what it comes down to. In order to have email work, you have to have some inherent trust in what you're dealing with. You can't block everything. You can't stop everything. And the moment you try to do so, your end users are going to revolt because they can't get work done. So then what safety net do you have around that to say, okay, I'm going to have to allow my users to click on some stuff. Some of these things may be dangerous. What have you put underneath of them to catch them if they fall off and make sure that the bad thing doesn't happen? And when we talk about the bad thing, I want to kind of preface that by saying this. Our three main business outcomes that we're trying to prevent are somebody getting access to the finances, whether that's direct access to bank accounts or jumping in the middle of a financial transaction or something like that.
Right.
It's stealing the money directly. This is all about money. That's what the hackers are doing this for. Secondly, I want to make sure that they don't steal your sensitive data and then try to blackmail you for it. Send it out to the dark web so that they have it, and then they'll say, hey, pay us a ransom so that we say that we deleted this data, or we're going to release it publicly or sell it or things like that. And then thirdly, we want to make it so they can't take your operations down. When they take your operations down, that's the traditional ransomware. That's why people pay ransoms. And so if we focus everything in your company's IT cybersecurity posture should be focused around that. How do we prevent the bad thing from happening? And I would say those three things are the worst things for most companies that we talk to. We want to prevent that, and then we want to look and expand the layers of security out to cover the ways that lead to that and start detecting the ways that lead to that so you can respond to it and then recover from that situation with this least impact upon your organization as possible.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, one of the big misconceptions I hear a lot is we are secure. We 100% secure. Nothing's going to get through. And it's just not true. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Realistically, so I audit hundreds of companies over the past years, and we've really only seen two companies that I would say are really doing an adequate job for cybersecurity. Most people are like this, and this is the picture of your average organization that you look at. They have a spam filter. They have a good firewall with all the security services turned on, like a next generation firewall. And it doesn't matter who it is, SonicWall, Fortinet, Meraki, it doesn't matter. They have that. And then they'll have an EDR-style antivirus on their computers, which the vendor who they bought it from told them that if you put this on there, it's going to stop everything that comes through. And everybody's focusing on prevent. So we're going to prevent these things from coming to your network. We're going to protect your network because we're going to stop this stuff from coming through. We're going to stop it at the spam filter. We're going to stop it at the firewall, and the EDR is going to stop it from running. Well, the hackers know this, and so they're starting to use more business email compromise to bypass the user training and the spam filters. They're starting to use more legitimate softwares against people, softwares that your EDR antivirus is going to never block. And so what we see is people have an idea of cybersecurity that's from legitimately a decade ago.
Right.
It's an older method of doing things where we're saying we're going to stop everything from coming through, and what we had to realize is that initial access is way easier than we thought. I, over the last several years, had to come to that realization because I raised my hand. I was a big firewall guy, right? Over 500 firewalls, it was what I did, is what I knew. And I had to come to the realization that a firewall is no longer the end-all, be-all. It's just a small piece of your cybersecurity puzzle, and it will block a lot of things. But what happens when the sophisticated attack gets through and it bypasses all those things? You need to have the ability to look for anomalous behavior. You need to look for indicators of compromise. You need to look for weird things happening and then detect those things after an endpoint's been compromised or an email's been compromised respond to that, get the bad guys kicked out, and then look and make sure what they touched and all those sorts of things, and that will lead to what your recovery is. And sometimes it's just resetting passwords on a user account and multi-factor authentication. Sometimes it's reformatting a user's computer, or if you're not looking at any of those things and you find out about it's too late, it's a full ransomware recovery. But how quickly you detect, how quickly you respond really changes what your recovery options look like.
Gotcha.
And we see most people just are ill-prepared to do those three things.
Yeah, and you had mentioned that, things have changed. 10 years ago, that may have been enough.
And it
right?
was.
And
Right, yeah.
it's kind of like passwords, right? When I first had to create a password, it was 8 characters, 1 capital letter, and that was good enough.
Yeah.
But nowadays, what are they recommending as far as a password goes?
Well, so if you look at a password like elephant, which would be some kind of word that we would have done back in the day, and it was a relatively long word, capital E, L, 3, PH, at, NT. You do the character substitution that you would look at. A modern hacker, if they were to download a password database, which they steal a lot, they download this password database and say it's encrypted, they could decrypt that password in less than a second.
Really?
Yeah. So we've done a really, really bad job as an industry teaching people how to make passwords that are really easy for criminals to break and computers to break, but really hard for them to remember. Did I replace all the E's with 3's? Where did I put the special character? I now have to click shift in weird spots. And so what we found out is longer passwords are better. And humans are better at remembering things in a story. So if we do sky flyer top 78 exclamation point, you capitalize sky, you capitalize the S, the F, and the T, it's easier for you to type. You can come up with a story for it. That would take centuries currently for a hacker to be able to decrypt that password. So 14 plus character passwords, 3 words are better at 2. So if you were to use 14 characters but have 2 words, it would be 9 months or so, which is still good. It's still better than less than a second. But it's better to have 3 smaller words because it prevents against dictionary attacks and things like that. Character substitutions out, and you want to have passwords that you as a user can remember and your employees can remember.
And breaking up a password would even be better too. Instead of subbing a letter for a character, just putting something in between but keeping the word is still better than that.
Yeah, because that prevents from dictionary attacks. And so what a dictionary attack is they know this pattern now.
Okay.
The bad guys know that you're going to use 2 or 3 random words, and so they're going to do common words and put them in combinations and then have that happen. If you take one of those common words and you break it up in the middle, like pumpkin, if you do PU and then an exclamation point before the rest of the word, not a character substitution, spell the whole word but just have it broken up.
Yeah.
Now these are 2 words that don't exist in a dictionary attack, and so it makes it harder for them to do what they do. I recommend passwords like that for ones you type in all the time, maybe your computer password or your password manager password, something that you want to memorize and make sure you have really secure.
Okay.
And we can talk too about password managers. They're better than nothing. Password reuse is much worse than having a password manager. And if you do use a password manager, you want a good master password and multi-factor authentication. But one of the things a password manager is going to do is have you do random character generated passwords.
Right.
Which are fine, right? They're super secure.
Right.
The problem is will you ever have to type that password? And if
Let's hope not, right?
Yeah, let's hope not.
Let's hope not.
Because I've had to do so. And so if it's a website or something like that, you're always going to be able to use your password manager and drop that password into, then do a random character. But if it's your computer password and it's a random character password, you're going to have a bad day. You're not going to be able to use your password manager to paste it in. You're not going to remember it.
Right.
It's going to be difficult. And so it's really playing that balancing act between what is useful security, and sometimes useful security isn't best, or sometimes useful security isn't the best security because the end users still need to be able to deploy it. The end users still need to be able to do their jobs. And what is the most secure is often not the best solution because it causes end users to have a hard time and they have to do workarounds.
And that makes total sense. Yeah. Thanks for explaining that, John. Now, so if they don't, if use a password manager, it's still better than kind of nothing, but you would recommend more of a longer password just in general instead, maybe 3 words, special characters, numbers, that sort of thing.
Yeah, for real. It's getting the length is the most important thing.
Okay.
And then making it in a manner that you can remember, that a human can remember, is better than having a password that's shorter and seems more complex, but it's easier for computers to break.
Gotcha. That makes total sense. And you had mentioned one of the kind of the latest vulnerability kind of being this business email compromise, which that accounts for what, 75%-ish?
I mean,
80%?
at least,
At
right?
least,
Email's
right.
in the chain of most of these attacks. Like it's where the initial access comes from most of the time.
Now, quick question. I did see something about a sonic wall thing that kind of just popped up. I've been reading a little bit about it. What's going on? Is there a vulnerability? Should we all be worried about that?
Yeah, so if you have a sonic wall, you need to patch it. There was recently a high-level vulnerability that was being attacked by a ransomware group. It was against the SSL VPN. Now, is this a sonic wall problem? Yes, but no. What realistically is going on is it's SSL VPN as a technology. So if you rely on SSL VPN to get into your network, that technology is being attacked by criminals.
Gotcha.
And what they're looking at is every single major firewall vendor has had a vulnerability within SSL VPN over the last 2 years. And I can list them off. It's like Palo Alto, Fortinet, Meraki, Sonic Wall, Checkpoint. It doesn't matter. The technology itself is what's being attacked. And so there are other secure methods that let decouple the VPN from your firewall. And really what the issue is with your VPN is being run off the firewall and they're attacking this technology, they're able to sometimes gain access to your network behind the firewall in a method that is not being blocked by the firewall. And what that realistically would look like is somebody could either get access to the firewall and open up ports that they could then infect your network behind it. We've seen cases where the firewall can be bypassed without any username and password, unauthenticated login due to these vulnerabilities. And so now the VPN client has direct access to the network that's behind it, and they can start attacking that. So when you talk about initial access, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the email side of things to get initial access, but also now there's a vulnerability in your system that bypasses that.
Well, that's terrifying, John.
Yeah.
To be honest with you. Now, so what would you say as far as VPN goes? Would you recommend people still, because, I mean, they're expecting to be secure using a VPN. What are your thoughts just on a VPN in general? Would recommend? No? Thumbs up? Thumbs down?
Well, so a VPN, yes, and there's other solutions for that decouple the VPN from your firewall.
Okay.
So we're looking a lot now at a product called SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, I think is what it stands for. Yeah, we have articles about it and everything we look at. But what it is an always-on VPN. Okay. It's through some other provider that's not your firewall. So if it does have a vulnerability, it doesn't leave your firewall vulnerable. And it's harder to attack because it's not a single point of thing. Then we're able to turn the SSL VPN off of your firewall and make your firewall more hidden from the bad guys so that the things that are protected aren't open to the internet through there. One of the benefits about it, though, is it's way easier to use. Very rarely in the world of cybersecurity do I get something that's more secure and also
actually easier.
Easier, right?
At
The endpoints like using it, right? The end users like using it. And so this one it's very easy. It's an always-on VPN. And what the really cool thing is, you connect to a public network, you connect to some of these other things, and your firewall's running. It's like you brought the enterprise firewall with you, and so it takes away some of these security concerns of connecting to public networks and things like that, because all your data is encrypted. It's all going through a secure gateway point, and so it's a lot harder for a criminal to do man-in-the-middle attacks and things like that. So we really want to have people do this. It makes the vulnerabilities as they come up to the firewall not be as damaging because, hey, the management interface is not facing the internet, which we recommend doing as well. Like if you have the public management interfaces, like have them on some lockdown thing that it can't be open to everybody in the world, including hackers. And then the SSL VPN, it gets turned off so it's invisible. So now this vulnerability comes up, and it's not an emergency to patch the firewall like that. You still want to do it, but the actual vulnerabilities that were there are taken away.
Gotcha. Oh, great info. Great info. Yeah. Now, speaking of security, there is a huge myth out there about I am in the cloud, I am good to go, I am secure, I don't have a server, everything's in the cloud. That means I am untouchable. Let's explain that. Let's talk more about that.
So there's a huge misconception with the cloud.
Yeah.
And really, realistically, what the cloud is somebody else's server. And so if you look at the terms of service from your cloud providers, they're all going to say these things. They're going to say, we as the cloud provider are going to protect it from our end, from the other clients that we have that won't have access to your data, or somebody hacks our side that won't get access to your data. If you look at the terms of service for them, they blatantly tell you, you need to protect your access. You need to make sure that MFA is turned on and that your password's good and you're not using password reuse and all those sorts of things. And so your responsibility is still to protect the front end of your data. And so we see all these issues where people are like, I'm secure, I'm in the cloud, and they don't have MFA turned on, they're reusing passwords like crazy, or they're doing nothing to protect their devices that connect to it. I have yet to run into a company whose financial people or HR people or whatever don't have personal identifiable information on their computers because that data had to get into the cloud somewhere.
Okay.
They had to type it in, or they had to fill out these things. Or a lot of these people are running reports, and the reports get saved to their downloads folder, and now there's banking information and credit cards and social security numbers and health information and all those things like that on these computers. And so you need to protect that data, regardless if it's in the cloud. It doesn't matter from your responsibility as somebody who holds the data is to protect it no matter where it lays. Okay. And so yes, you can move it to the cloud, and some of that protection side from the back end of their cloud goes away. But then you still have to control how you get data to the cloud, your front end access to the cloud. If a hacker gains access to your computer, and then they access the cloud from the computer that you're sitting on, we've seen cases where people have gotten their computers taken over and people file tax returns, fraudulent tax returns.
Oh, wow.
The IRS says that's your fault because you let somebody gain access to your computer.
And they're to blame now.
And we're going to take over we're going to revoke your ability to e-file.
Gotcha.
We've seen lots of cases like that. And if you look at compliance, was another thing. A lot of people think compliance is a dirty word. It just really helps you make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do. When you look at a lot of these compliances, they say, okay, we don't care where the data sits. How are you protecting it? How are you protecting the front end of that? How are you protecting your PCs, which could have data?
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I hear that one a lot.
Yeah,
they just have this confidence about them being in the cloud. So thank you for explaining that to everybody. Now, let me ask you this, John. You know, in the world, with where the world's going, there's some uncertainty, right? Of where it's kind of heading next, right? So, what would be, if I were to say, if I'm looking to do business with a Forbis, what would be the least amount of cybersecurity that I could actually have? What are your thoughts on that? Like, if I'm just like, hey, I just want the minimum, kind of, what does that look like? Is there a minimum?
It depends on what you do.
Okay.
Right. So it really, really depends on what type of data you have and what you're trying to do.
Okay.
I have not come across a company that can really afford the business outcomes that we were trying to prevent before. That's somebody getting access to the financials, stealing money from you or stealing your client's money. That is somebody losing their sensitive data because everybody has it.
Right.
That's somebody losing their sensitive data and then potentially having to pay a ransom to have it released. Or that's their operations getting tied up in a potential ransom happens there. And so it depends on what you want to do and how long you can live without your machines.
Okay.
I've not seen a hack that's not taken at least a few days to get people to where they're at even base level operations.
Oh, wow.
When they get to a ransomware event, we're looking at minimum, and this will be super generous, minimum 3 days of full downtime. That's every PC, everything that was affected by that ransomware not being able to be used. Generally, it's at least a week or two. And then from there, all these companies that I've seen that have gone through that and we've picked up after the fact that they've had the event, 9 months easy before they're just at the base level of where they were before.
Oh, wow.
And so can you afford for your business to be stagnant for 9 months? Can you afford to be fully down for a week or two? Those are the questions you need to think of, and then you reverse engineer there how much cybersecurity is enough.
Gotcha.
Well, I look at those companies that have all had that happen. They all had EDR antivirus. They all had a spam filter. They all had a next generation firewall. And they realistically, a lot of them had user training of what not to click on. The issue is they're not looking for the operational things that are going on. They're not looking for indicators of compromise. They're not looking for persistence, like somebody putting footholds into computers. They're not looking for, they don't even have an inventory realistic of what software is on all the computers.
Oh, wow.
So they don't know when a new software gets added, whether it's legitimate or not. And the hackers know this and they become more sophisticated. So what you really want to look at is say, you could do it a couple different ways. Do you know every single piece of software that's on every machine? And you are going to limit new software from being added.
Okay.
Do you know all the machines that you have?
Right.
Do you know where all your data sits? Do you know who should have access to that data? Do you know if it's backed up? Do you know these myriad of things? Do you know what normal user behavior looks like? Do you know this? Do you know this? Do you know this? Do you know this? There's two ways to go about it.
Yeah.
You can do it manually.
Right.
And you can have a lot of humans take a lot of work to figure it out.
It's a lot of work. Absolutely.
Right? Or you could have a company like ours come in and automate these systems and make it happen and make it affordable. We can do the things that your larger organizations are already doing, your medium 500 plus employee businesses are doing. We can bring that down to a scale that small business can afford, we have people that have less than 5 users that are on these systems that have these automated and things like that. We can bring it down to a level that they can afford, but still get the same outcomes that we're looking for, is preventing the 3 major bad things from happening, right? And detecting that quickly.
So it doesn't really matter how many things essentially are blocked, or what do we do, or what have we blocked, right? It's essentially, what if the big one were to slip through, that's the one that we would be focused on.
Well, and that's a really huge thing that we see. That's a super old school way to look at it, and I hear that a lot. Can you give me a report of all the things that we blocked? Well, it's worthless.
Yeah.
Because that just means we're blocking garbage, right?
Right, absolutely.
And all it takes is one sophisticated threat actor to get through at one point. And if you're not looking for what they're doing, and you're not looking to prevent those business outcomes, well, it doesn't matter that I blocked 75 million things when the one clever one gets through, and then they hold you to ransom for $100,000.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So you had mentioned, you've seen some, I'm sure you've seen a lot, right? You've seen some horror stories.
Seen some things,
you could probably talk about for hours.
Which we'll get into on other episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you had to pick kind of, what was the biggest horror story that you think that you've seen, or what was kind of the hardest one for someone to dig themselves out of that hole? Talk a little bit about that.
So it's normally the company who either thinks they're secure and they're using old practices, or they think they're too small to get hacked. And I have multiple cases of companies calling us after it's too late. Business email compromise where it's lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. We've had instances where somebody calls us to fix a VMware problem because they think they're having a server issue because their server's down for a day. We get out there the next day, and this new company that had called us, we find the ransomware note.
Oh, so it wasn't the server at all?
It wasn't
Actually,
the server.
They were ransomware.
So they were ransomware. Every single server, PC, everything was locked, encrypted, and the backups got destroyed in some manner, so they had to restore to 14-month-old data. It was really, really emotionally draining and hard for me personally, because I'm looking at these people that run this company that's been in their family for generations, and they're wondering if it's going to survive. It took them a week to get restored to old data. They found out that hundreds of gigs of data was transferred out to the threat actor.
Oh, wow.
And they paid a ransom in order to get them to say they deleted the data. And the threat actor actually provided tech support when the decryptor key didn't work and all those sorts of things. But realistically, it was a 9-month process, and this 30-person company estimated that they spent at least $500,000 to get them back up to status quo, right? To get them back up to just where they were. So it's a $500,000 investment into nothing that made their company better, nothing that did any of those sorts of things other than just getting back to operationally ground zero. But now they're running our security systems and things like that, and they're more secure. And when we had this reversed engineered with their cyber insurance and all those sorts of pieces, there were indicators of compromise that would have come up that would have been spotted.
Yeah, we would have seen that.
But by us or the Security Operations Center, that yes, they would have had a bad day, but it wouldn't have been the horrific event that it ended up being had they been looking for the right things and analyzing the right things and doing that from the get-go, right?
Now you had mentioned something about they were doing tech support. You said the hackers were doing tech support?
Yeah. So their decryptor key didn't work right away. Okay. So when they gave the key to decrypt the data that was left over on the machines that we found, it didn't work. And so they provided support to get their decryptor key working. So, and what it realistically comes down to is they have a reputation to uphold, as ridiculous as that sounds. People wouldn't pay a ransom if they thought that they weren't going to get the data back.
Wow. So basically they're hacking so many people, they didn't know which one that they had potentially gotten access to. Is that kind of right?
Well, actually, that's a different story with this one. Yes. So initially, it took them a month to find out that they even hacked this company, because they hacked so many people they didn't remember which one it was. Oh, my God. And so it was a month before they were able to even find the information that they decrypted and work with the insurance on doing that sort of thing. Yeah. But then past that, when they sent over their decryptor to unencrypt all the files that they had, that didn't work. Yeah. And so when you talk about crazy things you never think about, ransom negotiators got involved, which is a third-party people that was provided by the cyber insurance. When the ransom negotiators got involved and talked to them, they said, hey, this isn't working. They asked for some sample files, sent it over. They did troubleshooting and made sure their decryptor was working, and then they went on their way. But yeah, it was about 9 months, though, even after getting that decrypted, between them getting back to full operations.
And that's one of the other myths that I hear a lot is, people who they hear hacker, they think someone in a dark basement, and that's how they got their hood up, right? And they're just one person just trying to hack the entire globe, right? Yeah. But they have their own organizational chart and everything, right? They're large.
It's big business.
Large business.
So it's the third largest global economy is is money lost to hacking. It's somewhere around the realm of $19 million a minute last year was lost to hacking.
Now, is that in the U.S. or is that globally?
It's globally, but the
still.
U.S. is one of the largest targets. And a lot of this was small, medium business because your larger organizations have locked themselves down. But here's the truth of the matter. They spray, right? And so these companies who think they're too small to get hacked, they might not be on the radar immediately. But somebody that they work with will get their email compromised, and then they'll work to get those people compromised. And now your company, they have initial access into whether an email or into the network in general. Then you're a massive target. And what they see is, hey, how much money do I think I could get out of this company based on the defenses that they have? Well, I know I could allocate a hacker so many hours here and potentially get $50,000, $60,000 of a ransomware payment or more. That's a good return on investment for a guy spending maybe 20, 40 hours on something like this. And so they have those ROI calculators. They have the returns that they're looking for. These people have quotas. They have management. They have things like that they're supposed to meet. And some hacker in their organization sends them playbooks to follow. You can pinpoint a lot of the ransomware companies that are out there by how their operations are, because they've had different ones baked in and they operate a little bit differently. But the whole goal is always the same. How do I get in there to where I can either directly steal the financials, I can steal the data and blackmail you for it, or I can take down your operations so you'll pay a ransom. It's always about money. And it's big business.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I'm starting to get a little scared over here with all the stuff you're telling me, John. But no, and you're right. And then that's and that's why we're doing this is to kind of debunk some of these myths and to really, so everyone has a good understanding of what's really going on.
Well, I mean, and that's the piece here. And that's what we're looking at is I see when I go and talk to these people, the businesses that I work with, they are not prepared for what's actually out there, what the threats that they're actually facing. And I have to do a huge amount of things in the moment to educate them about what they're realistically facing. And so the more educated that we can make the populace, the more educated that we can make the people about what's going on and how to prevent some of these things and how to detect them and do those is why we're wanting to do this and why we're wanting to push this forward is the more we can do that, the safer everyone can be.
Right, and that's our goal, right? Let's just try to get our local businesses as safe as possible. In fact, you can find a lot of our information under our blog section on our website. It's all free. Post it, read it. If you have questions, reach out to us. We're happy to give you our expertise.
Yeah, and we're going to have deeper dives into some of these topics. We got a lot of good stuff planned, and the whole idea of this is to not make it tech babble and jargon. We want it to be useful for the people that are running these companies to know what they need to do and the things that they need to be asking of their IT and cybersecurity to really get this done and protect themselves.
Absolutely.
So thank you for being here.
All right. Thank you for joining us, guys. Until next time, this is Forbes. Click with caution.